Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've worked security for 15 years, 7 of those with TSA. I've seen everything from belligerent tourists to smugglers who think a deck of cards can hide a blade. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night at Denver International. The shift started like any other. Quiet. Too quiet. It was just past 11 p.m., and Concourse B had thinned out after the last wave of Southwest flights. The terminal lights buzzed softly, casting long reflections across the polished terrazzo floors. You learned to read the rhythm of the place, the steady pulse of movement, the echo of suitcase wheels, the low din of announcements. But that night, something felt off. I was stationed at the North Security Checkpoint. My name's Marcus Vega, by the way, TSA agent, former military, stationed here since 2018. Denver's airport is a beast, over 33,000 acres, one of the largest in the world. The underground trams, the sprawling terminals, and the damn endless corridors. It's a maze, even for those of us who work it every day. I always carried a folding Benchmade clipped to my belt, not regulation, but I never liked being unarmed. Just after midnight, a United flight, UA 1178 from San Diego, made an unscheduled landing. It was supposed to continue on to Chicago but was diverted mid-air. Word among the crew was that there'd been a medical emergency on board. That's not uncommon, especially on red-eyes. But the details were fuzzy. The air traffic guys had flagged it as a Level 3 containment concern, a term I'd never heard in 12 years of federal work. I watched from the glass windows above the concourse as the plane was towed to Gate B-42. No jet bridge was extended. Instead, hazmat-suited responders met the aircraft on the tarmac. I caught glimpses of them: white suits, air tanks, patchy movement under the floodlights. The whole plane was sealed. No one disembarked. An hour later, the rumors started. A ground ops guy named Tompkins came in with wide eyes and shaky hands. 2 passengers seized up, full convulsions. EMS tried to revive one and he bit a responder. Tompkins had worked Denver for 20 years. I'd never seen the man rattled like that. I checked my radio, no alerts, no updates, not even a formal lockdown call. Instead, at 1:17 a.m., all security zones went code echo. That's internal protocol for elevated threat containment, usually tied to chemical spills or high-profile threats. The screens flashed red across our tablets. All exit doors on B and C concourses were electronically sealed. Jet bridges locked. The tram was halted without warning, leaving people stranded between terminals. Suddenly, we weren't just watching over passengers. We were part of the containment net. The terminal got quiet real fast. No more boarding calls, no more gate change announcements. Just the occasional repeating chime over the PA. Please remain calm. Emergency services are responding to a medical situation. I walked down toward the gates with Officer Lynn Huerta, one of the airport police officers. She was former LAPD, sharp by the book. She kept her hand on her utility belt, where she carried a Glock 19 Gen 5 and a taser. We passed Gate B-45, where a flight to New York was delayed. A cluster of passengers stood near the windows, watching the frozen jet bridge with growing unease. "Why aren't we evacuating?" Lynn muttered, checking her shoulder mic for a working signal. Nothing but static. "I think we are the quarantine," I said quietly. By 2 a.m., we had over 600 passengers stuck in Concourse B and at least another 400 in C. They began to realize something was wrong when cell signals started dropping. Someone posted a blurry video from Gate B-42 on Twitter. People in white suits wrestling a shaking man onto a stretcher. The man's eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale, mottled. His teeth looked wrong, like he was grinding them to nubs. Airport Wi-Fi was still active, for now, but most of the feed was locked down. News stations were running the same looping message. Ongoing containment procedures in select U.S. airports. Remain indoors. I found myself pacing back and forth near the central food court, closed, but still smelling of stale coffee and reheated pretzels. That's where I met Samira Al-Hadi, an off-duty ER nurse from UC Health. She'd been traveling back from visiting family in LA, short, dark hair, quick eyes, and the kind of confidence that only comes from doing real work in chaos. I've seen fevers, seizures, overdoses, but whatever that was, she said, glancing toward the sealed-off gate, it's not viral, not normal. You think it's biological? I asked. She shook her head. Maybe at first, but I saw that guy, the one in the video, the way he moved. Marcus, people don't bend like that. By 3 a.m., everything collapsed. Concourse B's lights flickered once, then dimmed. Emergency backup lighting kicked in. Soft amber bands along the floor and flickering fluorescence overhead. The terminal went from sterile to claustrophobic in an instant. Then the screaming started. Gate B, 38. A passenger had collapsed. According to reports, he'd been on the San Diego flight but had passed initial screening. He started convulsing near the vending machines. A janitor named Reed tried to help him, thought it was epilepsy. Then the man latched onto Reed's forearm with his teeth. The sound. God, I still hear it. Not a shout, a gurgle, wet and deep, like someone choking on tar. We responded in under 2 minutes, but it was too late. Reed was bleeding badly. The attacker was on his feet, eyes glassy, mouth coated in red. His skin had gone gray-blue, not like a corpse. Worse, like it was changing minute by minute. Lynn aimed her weapon, tried to get him to stand down. He lunged. 2 shots rang out, both hits center mass. He didn't fall. We backed off. I grabbed Lynn by the vest and we sprinted back toward the core food court. Behind us, he was still walking. I tried radioing command again, nothing. Our phones were bricks. The internal paging system played nothing but silence. Whatever was happening, we were on our own. Samira grabbed a spill kit and started treating Reed in a closed Starbucks. She kept her cool, even when Reed started gasping and flailing. I tried to restrain him. He was burning up. Fever of 105.5 according to her thermometer. Then, within seconds, his pulse flatlined. We tried CPR. He snapped back awake and tried to bite my neck. I don't remember how I got away, just that Lynn tased him at full blast, and even that only slowed him down. It was spreading. The order came not from a voice, but from the screen. All units, fall back to terminal core, contain at all costs. It was the last thing the monitors displayed before blacking out. We sealed the security checkpoint using the manual lock override. Metal gates came down across the entrances. But people were panicking. Families with kids screamed. Elderly passengers clutched at each other, trying to get out. Some were infected already. Gate B, 36 had 3 down, then 5, then more. They came staggering from the closed jetways, passengers who'd been locked inside with someone sick. We saw them through the glass, their eyes reflecting the dim hallway lights. They weren't walking. They were twitching forward, like bones had loosened, muscles torn. I saw a man crawl using his forearms, trailing a twisted leg, and still he moved faster than I could believe. Lynn emptied half a magazine, trying to keep them from the main hallway. I pulled out a fire axe from the emergency cabinet. Regulation says you don't engage unless you're trained. At that point, rules didn't mean a damn thing. We retreated down a side corridor meant for custodial staff. Samira, Lynn, and I, along with 3 others. One was a tech from Airport IT named Jordan Wynn. He knew the layout and had a badge that still worked on some access doors. Another was a mother named Elena and her teenage son Kai, both coming from a connecting flight from Seattle. "We need to reach the service elevator," Jordan said. "It leads to the underground tram maintenance corridor. Might be a way out." "Tram's dead," I said. "Power's out. We don't need the tram. We just need to follow the tunnel. It leads to the control station near Terminal A. It might still be secure." We didn't have options. Behind us, the sounds echoed. Feet slapping tile, heavy breathing, growls that no human throat should make. Some were crawling through vent grates. One of them used an emergency extinguisher to break through a glass panel. They weren't mindless. They were learning. We made it to the elevator by 4:20 a.m. I jammed the axe handle into the door to keep it open. Inside, we stood in darkness, save for one flickering LED on Jordan's handheld radio. The elevator hadn't responded to the call button. Power was still intermittent, but the access door to the maintenance stairwell next to it was cracked open. I pushed through first, flashlight held tight under my arm, axe gripped in my right hand. The others followed in tense silence, each breath echoing against the narrow cinder block walls. The air down there was different. Cooler, still, but carrying a stale, metallic tang from the underlying infrastructure. We were moving beneath Concourse B now, into the restricted maintenance access corridors rarely seen by the public. These concrete arteries threaded through the airport's underbelly like veins, filled with cabling trays, ventilation ducts, and rows of access panels marked with yellow placards. Occasionally, we passed a locked room or steel maintenance cabinet labeled with zone identifiers like BMNT 327 or HVSE J2. Jordan led the way, his tablet flickering back to life for short bursts before fading again. We descended 2 more flights of metal stairs into the secondary tram maintenance level, an industrial hall buried beneath the public train lines. This was a place built for machines, not people. On one side of the corridor stood sealed bays for tram repair. Beyond them, low-slung tunnels ran east and west, connecting terminals with emergency evacuation routes, service tracks, and cable rooms. Few staff even knew the complete map down here. Jordan did, and that made him more valuable than any badge or sidearm. We gathered in a break room, probably used by the tech and janitorial crews during overnight shifts. It had a table, a few chairs, a broken vending machine, and, most importantly, manual lock controls. Jordan bypassed the door access with a service key, then reinforced it with a metal bar from a downed shelving unit. For the first time in hours, we weren't just reacting, we were barricading. I took stock of our group. Lynn Huerta, the airport cop, was holding herself together with sheer grit, pacing by the door with her weapon always within reach. Samira, the ER nurse, was kneeling beside Elena's teenage son Kai, checking his vitals and trying to calm him. The kid hadn't said a word since we left the food court, and I was starting to worry about shock. Elena sat beside him, her face tight and pale, one hand still clutching the strap of her purse like a lifeline. Jordan, meanwhile, was hunched over a nearby cabinet, pulling out what tools and schematics he could find. The sound of the infected above hadn't followed us yet, but every so often the air vents would carry a distant echo. A scrape, a muffled scream. Sometimes nothing at all, and that silence was worse. I sat down and pulled off my gloves, hands shaking harder than I wanted to admit. In that moment, the only thing I could focus on was the thudding in my chest and the acrid scent of sweat soaked into my uniform. Every instinct screamed to move, to not sit still, but we needed a plan. Jordan finally spoke, voice quiet and even, the kind of tone you use when you're trying not to break. There's a secondary access tunnel that runs from this maintenance level under the tarmac to Terminal A's mechanical core. It's used for maintenance carts and HVAC inspection. If we can reach it, there's a backup generator hub and an emergency egress to the surface near the terminal's perimeter. It's not tied into the public grid. If the rest of the system is down, it may still be hot. How far? I asked. 1/4 mile, straight shot, he said. But there are 2 bulkhead gates between here and there. If they're sealed, we're either cutting through or turn around. Do we even know if Terminal A's secure? Lynn asked. We could be walking straight into another kill zone. No, but we know staying here isn't an option. I looked at each of them in turn. These things, whatever they are, they're getting smarter. They broke through a secured jetway door. They're not wandering aimlessly, they're hunting. Sooner or later, they'll sniff out this level. Samira stood up and dusted off her hands. Then we move past. We prep what we can, and we keep going. We scavenged what little gear the room had: 2 aluminum flashlights, a mostly full med kit, and a coil of utility rope. I added a multi-tool and a maintenance crowbar to my belt, then replaced the axe's fraying grip with electrical tape. Lynn checked her remaining rounds and holstered the Glock, then handed me a spare tactical flashlight. Kai was given a hard hat with a mounted lamp, and I secured it with a zip tie from the cabinet. Samira duct-taped her phone to her chest for light and kept the first aid kit on her shoulder. It wasn't much, but it felt better than nothing. We stepped into the tunnel at 5:03 a.m. The passage was narrower than I expected, 6 feet wide, maybe 8 high, with overhead conduit pipes hissing intermittently. The cement walls were cold and damp. Every step we took echoed for several seconds. We moved in a staggered line, with me and Lynn at the front, Jordan in the middle with Elena and Kai, and Samira taking up the rear. 10 minutes in, the lights overhead flickered and died completely. We kept walking. Jordan's tablet buzzed faintly with life again as we neared the first bulkhead gate. Its faded label read A-04B. The locking wheel had been jammed with rust and something darker. Blood, or what looked like it. I braced my legs and cranked to the wheel, feeling the strain in my shoulders. The mechanism gave a groan like a dying animal, and with a hiss of escaping air, the door slid open just enough for us to slip through one by one. The hallway beyond was warmer. That wasn't good. Heat meant activity. And in the dark, activity meant danger. As we crept forward, we passed abandoned utility carts, tool bins, and service boxes scattered along the walls. Some had been ransacked. Others looked like they'd been left mid-task. There were fresh scuff marks along the floor, rubber shoe prints leading away from the tracks, smeared with what I knew deep down was blood. Samira kept her eyes forward, but I saw her press her fingers to her throat, checking her own pulse. We were all running on adrenaline and dread. Then we found the maintenance locker. It had been forced open, the steel door twisted off its hinges like tinfoil. Inside we found 2 bodies, workers, both male, uniform shredded. One still had his ID clipped to his collar. Raymond T. Miller, infrastructure technician 2. His radio was on the floor beside him, cracked but functional. Lynn picked it up and tried to scan frequencies, but all she got was static and a broken emergency beacon tone repeating every 7 seconds. We didn't linger. Another 50 meters, and the sound changed. Ahead, past the second bulkhead, came the rhythmic clang of something metal. Slow, deliberate, not random. Something was alive on the other side. Jordan stopped and whispered, "That's the East Service gate." Beyond that is the generator room." I nodded and motioned for silence. Lynn and I flanked the gate, weapons raised. Jordan eased the locking wheel. It opened much smoother than the last. The room beyond glowed with the faint orange pulse of a still-operating backup generator. The air was heavy with ozone and fuel vapor. The machine hummed steadily. A diesel-fed unit mounted inside a steel cage, and standing beside it, hunched over a fallen technician, was a figure. It turned when it heard the door open. Its skin was burned, splotchy, and torn, like it had clawed its way through metal and flame. One arm hung at an unnatural angle, bone exposed at the elbow. Its face, what was left of it, was twisted with a permanent snarl, and its eyes were milky white, but they locked on us with terrifying precision. It sprinted. I fired first, instinct pure and simple. The shot caught it in the shoulder and spun it back, but it didn't stop. Lynn fired next, 2 rounds center mass, and still it kept coming. I raised the axe and swung, the blade crunching into the side of its neck. It staggered but didn't fall. Its mouth opened as if to scream, but the only sound that came out was a deep, rattling hiss, wet and wrong. As if its lungs were full of black water, it lunged forward, not with desperation but with a terrible, direct intent. This wasn't frenzy, it was coordination, purpose. I braced for another blow, but Samira was already behind it, swinging the crowbar in a tight arc. The first strike cracked the back of its skull. The second caved it in. It dropped mid-step, legs buckling, twitching once before lying still. We waited, watching it with our breath caught in our throats. Then I stepped forward and drove the axe down into what was left of its neck, severing the spine in one clean strike. Only then did I feel it. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly hold the handle. We stood in stunned silence. The generator's steady hum filled the air around us, vibrating through the steel floor. It was still running at 63% capacity. That meant lights. That meant doors. Maybe even communication. Jordan moved fast, kneeling beside the nearby maintenance console and flipping open a metal panel lined with blinking fuses and labeled toggle switches. I turned toward Lynn, who had dropped to one knee, reloading from her final magazine. Her hands were slick with sweat, jaw set hard. "I'm good," she muttered before I could ask. "Just needed to breathe." Samira stood near the technician's body, staring down at the still form with the crowbar hanging loosely in her hand. I wanted to thank her, to tell her she saved our lives, but I could see in her face that the act had cost her something she hadn't expected to spend. The rest of the group moved into the room. Elena had her son's arm wrapped tight in hers. Kai was still quiet, but he was watching everything. Hyper-aware, absorbing every detail like a soldier scanning a battlefield. His silence wasn't fear. It was calculation. I made a mental note to keep him close. Jordan got the panel open and traced a finger across a faded laminated map taped inside the door. "Okay," he said, voice calm and methodical. "We've got power rerouted from this unit into the emergency access grid. That includes airfield service locks and maintenance-level terminal entry. It should get us through the final blast door leading to Terminal A's substructure." "How long before it runs out?" I asked. He checked the screen. "Maybe 2-3 hours if we don't overload it. It's meant for backup ventilation and lighting, not powering full door mechanisms. If we trigger too many systems at once, we'll short the whole panel." "Then we move now," I said. "We get through that last door and we don't stop." We left the generator room behind, following Jordan through a narrower corridor leading to a steel access hatch marked ACNTR4. He explained it was a bypass route to avoid the central cable artery, which had too many open vent shafts and unsecured junctions. The corridor was tighter, more claustrophobic, lit by emergency strips of amber LEDs powered by the generator. As we walked, our footsteps echoed back at us in quiet waves. No one spoke for the next 15 minutes. We were all listening for it, the telltale shuffling, the guttural growls, the wet scrape of bone on cement. But the tunnel remained eerily quiet, as if the things that had pursued us were holding back, waiting. When we reached the final bulkhead, Jordan stopped and tapped the control panel mounted beside the reinforced door. This one was newer than the last, updated after a systems upgrade in 2022. It had biometric backup and a manual override slot. The screen blinked green as the power stabilized. Then we heard it. Behind us, maybe 100 meters down the tunnel, came a soft echo. Not a scream, not a shout. A chorus of clicking sounds. Bone against bone, teeth on tile. They were following, and they were close. "Do it," I said. Jordan inserted the override key and flipped the master switch. The door began to rise slowly with a hydraulic hiss. The lights inside Terminal A's substructure flickered on one by one, cold, white fluorescence that buzzed with life. The hall beyond was larger than I expected, double wide, built to accommodate fuel line trolleys and baggage loaders. And most importantly, it was empty. "Go!" I barked, pushing the group through first. Lynn covered the rear while I waited by the door with axe and flashlight ready. I saw shadows at the far end of the tunnel, bodies moving fast but not running, crawling on walls, dropping from ducts. The lights made their skin gleam like oil. The door wasn't built for speed. It hissed and lowered like a drawbridge in a nightmare. Two came into full view, eyes reflective, jaws wide. One dropped to all fours and accelerated. I raised the axe, heart hammering. The door slammed down just as its claws scraped the cement inches from the threshold. Sparks flew, dust swirled, and then silence. I stumbled back, adrenaline surging like ice through my chest. Samira steadied me by the arm as I sucked in breath. "They're evolving," she said quietly. "They're moving like predators now." Jordan didn't look up from his tablet. "If they reach the surface in this condition, containment's impossible." We pushed deeper into the Terminal A infrastructure corridor, heading toward a stairwell labeled Sub-A, 1, Emergency Surface Exit. The plan was to ascend into the service corridor on the northern side of the terminal, bypassing the terminal's main passenger floor. According to Jordan, it led to a ground vehicle bay used by fuel and catering trucks. If the exit was still unsecured, it might lead outside the blast perimeter. As we climbed, the air grew warmer. A chemical odor clung to the walls, mingling with the smell of fuel and scorched rubber. At the top of the stairwell, Lynn pushed open a steel hatch and peered into the space beyond. She motioned us through, one by one. We emerged into the service corridor on the north side of Terminal A, near the airfield perimeter fence. The space was dimly lit and partially damaged. The fire suppression system had activated at some point, and the floors were slick with foam residue. Overturned bins and splintered lockers littered the sides, but there were no bodies, no movement. Kai pointed toward a wide metal door with a shattered window. "That leads outside, right?" Jordan nodded. "Yeah, that's the perimeter bay gate. If it's open, we can get through the fence line." Lynn and I moved first, sweeping the area. We passed a row of idling service carts, one still humming quietly, its ignition switch blinking red. That meant something had triggered its startup sequence in the last hour. The exterior gate was sealed, but the control panel was online. Jordan bypassed the security code using his badge and a key override, then rerouted power from the emergency grid. The gate groaned and shuddered upward. Beyond it lay the open tarmac. The sky was beginning to pale with the first signs of dawn. A dull orange glow lit the edge of the Rocky Mountains. But the field in front of us was far from empty. Debris covered the airfield: luggage, foam cannons, emergency slides. A burned-out baggage cart lay on its side, and farther down the runway, a private Gulfstream jet sat abandoned, its hatch open and stair ramp down. Red lights blinked on the fuselage, signaling a low-power distress status. But it was the figures near the terminal wall that froze us all in place. Dozens of them, standing, still watching. Their heads turned in unison as the metal gate finished its rise. And for a long moment no one moved, not us, not them. Then, like a signal had been given, they rushed. Lynn opened fire. I pulled Elena and Kai behind a catering truck. Samira grabbed the medkit and sprinted to cover. Jordan yelled something about the fence controls, but was drowned out by the sound of claws on asphalt. We didn't run for the open field. We ran for the jet. I don't remember getting there, just flashes. The feel of a hand grabbing my jacket. The deafening sound of gunfire. Kai screaming my name. And the horrible, choking rasp of something close behind me, always just out of reach. Then the blinding white of the fuselage lights as we crossed into the aircraft. The stair ramp shook violently as Lynn fired one last round down the tarmac before vaulting up after us. Jordan slammed the hatch control inside the door, and the panel sealed with a heavy metallic hiss. Inside, everything went silent. The air was cooler, still pressurized. The cabin lighting was dim but steady. Emergency systems were still online. I leaned against the bulkhead trying to catch my breath as the adrenaline drained from my body all at once. Samira was already checking Elena's shoulder, where a stray shard of glass had torn through the jacket. Blood soaked through the outer layers, but the wound didn't look deep. Lynn was crouched by the front galley, reloading what few rounds she had left into the Glock's empty magazine. Her fingers were raw, her breathing sharp and shallow. Jordan, always the quiet one, had taken the co-pilot seat and was scanning the overhead panels. APUs still got reserve power. Looks like they prepped this thing to fly but never cleared for takeoff. His voice was tight, like he was speaking around a growing panic that hadn't yet fully hit him. Main systems are cold, no flight plan loaded. They were either rushing or interrupted. I peered through the small starboard window. The infected had gathered around the base of the aircraft. Some stood motionless. Others paced in circles, while a few scraped at the landing gear or sniffed the air like feral dogs tracking prey. I counted at least 30, more than we could ever push through, and more were appearing from the shadows, drawn by noise, by movement, maybe even by scent. We were grounded. Samira joined me near the forward galley. This isn't going to hold them off forever. The hydraulics on that hatch were meant for pressure sealing, not brute force. They'll tear it open if they're coordinated enough. They are, I said. Not because I knew for sure, but because I felt it in my bones. The way they had moved in sync on the tarmac, the way they had flanked us at the gate. This wasn't infection spreading randomly. It was organized now, somehow evolving. I'd seen it in the eyes of the one that lunged in the generator room. Not madness. Purpose. Jordan looked back from the cockpit. If we can get the APU running long enough, I might be able to tap into airport communications through the transponder link. Shortwave, line of sight only, but there's a chance someone's still listening. Even if someone hears, Samira said, what then? Do they come in, risk getting infected? No one's going to land a chopper in a quarantine zone. I'm not asking for rescue, I told them. Just warning. Someone needs to know what's happening here. The lockdown failed. The infected broke containment. They're in the infrastructure, the tunnels, probably the ventilation systems too. If we don't report this, really report this, it's going to spread to the city before dawn. I knew what that meant. DIA is 25 miles from downtown Denver, but its tramways, employee roads, and freight lines linked to the greater metro like veins in a body. If even a few infected made it through a cargo vehicle checkpoint, it wouldn't take long to reach the suburbs. And with the kind of transformation we'd seen, from fever to full aggression in under 10 minutes, there'd be no stopping it once it crossed into civilian zones. Kai tapped my arm and pointed toward one of the in-seat displays. The safety screen had blinked to life, displaying a looped message in white block text on a red field. Federal Quarantine Protocol, Alpha 9 in effect. All survivors remain in place. Do not attempt to exit. Await federal response. Alpha 9, I whispered. That wasn't airport protocol. That was CDC military crossover code, a level used in biohazard containment events too volatile for open press. I'd only heard the term once during joint training in Atlanta, used during simulation for an airborne hemorrhagic viral event. It meant complete regional shutdown, communications blackouts, asset neutralization if containment failed. Lynn had heard it too. She turned from the cockpit doorway. If they've activated Alpha 9, no one's coming. Not for us, not for the passengers still alive in the concourses. It hit me then. The lockdown wasn't a rescue strategy, it was an erasure plan. Keep the infected sealed, bury the evidence, delay the panic, and if that failed, send drones. Use thermobarics, seal the airfield and fire. I turned to Jordan. Send the signal now. He didn't hesitate. Fingers flying across the old analog comm interface, he patched into the aircraft's ELT, emergency locator transmitter, and redirected it to a sideband military channel. Then he keyed up the mic and handed it to me. I spoke as clearly as I could. This is TSA Agent Marcus Vega, broadcasting from Denver International, coordinates 39.8617N, 104.6731W. Terminal B was breached. Concourse lockdown has failed. Infected are loose in multiple secured sectors. Unknown pathogen, high aggression, rapid onset symptoms. Communication blackout confirmed. Civilian survivors unaccounted for. We are trapped inside a grounded Gulfstream jet at Gate A24. We are surrounded. I repeat, we are surrounded. Quarantine failed. This is not a drill. I release the button. Static. Then a low chirp. Signal received, but no reply. Jordan rekeyed the channel to loop the broadcast every 60 seconds. We waited. Minutes passed. Outside, the crowd of infected pressed closer. One of them, a woman in a tattered ground crew uniform, climbed halfway up the stair ramp, pawing at the sealed hatch with both hands. Her skin was pale, flaking. Dried blood stained her collar. But what chilled me most wasn't her appearance. It was the way her head tilted, listening, learning. They're not trying to break in, Samira said softly. Not yet, they're testing us. Lynn peered through the top hatch window. Maybe they're waiting for us to make a mistake. Or maybe they knew something we didn't. The comms crackled suddenly. Jordan lunged for the receiver. A voice came through, garbled, faint, distorted by interference. Station Echo, repeat, containment breach acknowledged. No evac. Advise hold position. Alpha 9 escalating. Perimeter incursion confirmed. Secure all access points. Do not attempt surface egress. Contingency en route hold, God help you all. Then silence. We stared at each other, letting the meaning settle like cold lead. Perimeter incursion? Elena asked, voice shaking. Does that mean the city? No one answered. The truth hung there, unspoken. If the infected were outside the airfield perimeter, then this wasn't just Denver's problem anymore, it was global. Kai finally broke the silence, his voice barely audible. "What do we do now?" I looked around the cabin. At the blood-streaked floor, the dented cockpit, the blinking red comm light, and the faces of the only people left in my world. "We hold," I said. "We don't run. We don't break formation. We don't give them a reason to force the hatch. We wait for the sun to rise and hope someone's listening." And outside the fuselage, as the sky slowly turned from black to ash-gray, the infected did not charge. They did not claw. They waited, silent, patient, like they knew this was just the beginning. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.